Test. Oh yeah, looks like I'm good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro?
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring.
Boring.
20 years of festival work.
Whatever.
And the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we?
Oh.
Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, dimwit.
Look, I'm a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tightened your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Phil Wyman. This episode of Wild Theology is Love Bigger, Go Home Part 7, and I'm going to be talking about the connection of nomadic nature of the gospel, which has been a part of this ongoing series, and economics. So, there we go. So, economics, it comes from the Greek word oikonomos, oikos, which is house, and nomos, which is rule or law. And so, using that as kind of our jumping off point, there we go. Economics wasn't always about mathematics. It was ethical, philosophical, it was psychological before there was psychology, and it was bound up with complexities of the human condition and our evolving morality. In fact, economics perhaps was downright theological, and all you have to do is read the book of Proverbs and Solomon's writing that has so much economics built into it to see a moral nature of economics. John Locke's second treatise on civil government, in fact, a lot of his writings are filled with economic thoughts, and much of that is very morally based. Same thing with Adam Smith. Economics today tends to be a science of production and transfer of wealth. It's primarily a mathematical exercise. It's a measurement of the division of labor, productivity, and growth, and through it, economists have become like the new priests of the American dream. We tune into their daily predictions and the mathematical formulas on the news. They tell us the direction they believe the stock market, commodities, foreign exchange markets will move, and we respond to their predictions like advice from a counselor or teachings of a prophet. And we determine the health of our nation by economic factors. Those factors are numbers on a sheet or a computer screen. Bill Clinton reminded himself that this was the foremost concern on the American mind while he ran for the presidency. On the wall of his office was a reminder of this fact. It said, quote, "The economy, stupid," quote, unquote. In 2016, Americans took this to the extreme and voted for a supposedly self-made billionaire who said he would fix the nation and make America great again. Contrasted to this, Simon Anholt started what's called the Good Country Index in 2014, using 7 categories. 163 nations are tracked to determine how they positively influence the planet, other nations, and the human race with their policies and behaviors. Right now, the Netherlands tops the list, and just a few years ago it was Ireland. The criteria for determining the countries at the top of this list has been challenged by some economists, and it certainly isn't foolproof. But after seeing this list for the first time, I was relieved to see that someone was focusing on the goodness of nations rather than looking at what we consider typically to be great by economic or military standards. The Good Country Index is a shift toward trying to be good as opposed to trying to be great. I think this is also a shift toward others and service and away from ourselves, and a me first or us first approach to life. For me, this was a breath of fresh air in a season when we are boasting that we want to make America great again. Too often our greatness appears to come at the expense of our ethics. In the summer of 2018, I was in a pub in Prague. My friend Sasha introduced me to his friend, Tomáš Sedláček. Tomáš is, we debated the existence of God and topics like economics and morality. He got passionate, I got passionate, I got louder, he yelled, I yelled back, and this went on for quite some time. Then Tomáš leaned across the table and said, "This is not making you mad, is it?" And I leaned into him and said, "No, I'm having a great time, this is fun." He laughed and said, "Me too. Most people think I'm getting mad when I do this." And we continued debating just as robustly as before. So I love a good debate, and so does Tomáš. And we spent hours talking. Tomáš Sedláček is an economist and a philosophy professor. He is an author of an international best-selling book on economics. It's called The Economics of Good and Evil, and it tracks the history of economics from the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Old Testament through today. He describes the purpose of his book in these words, quote, "I argue that economics should seek, discover, and talk about its own values, although we have been taught that economics is a value-free science. I argue that none of this is true and that there is more religion, myth, and archetype in economics than there is mathematics." Unquote. Perhaps the only place we find economics regularly meeting ethics today is in social action. In these situations, economics are used as a form of ethics warfare. People protest for their choices and boycott companies that do not hold standards of the protesting community. So we boycotted Apple based on information about the abuse of workers in Apple factories in China, despite the fact that the information came from a journalist who concocted false stories and traveled around the U.S. retelling this made-up news. In some cases, a boycott may be directed against companies giving to nonprofit groups one disagrees with or holding political positions one feels are biased. We've seen this with young progressives boycotting Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A over LGBTQ issues. These actions are actions of economic warfare and seek to change laws and corporate behavior through financial punishment. This form of ethical economics carries a different kind of moral code than that which was found in the ancient Greek oikonomos, or the Hebrew Old Testament laws, which focused upon the behavior of individuals as it respects issues such as greed and caring for our fellow human beings. Tomáš Sedláček's approach is controversial, and perhaps even radical in the light of modern economics. He believes that it was through a poor reading of Hume, Locke, and Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations that economics came of age with the belief that morality and economics are completely unrelated. So, Peter Turchin is an evolutionary anthropologist at the University of Connecticut. He writes about this issue in his blog, Evonomics, the Evolution of Economics. He recalls the letter of a friend who responded to his book, Ultra Society. In the blog post, we find his friend, the economist Branko Milanovic, defending the idea that morality and economics have nothing to do with one another. And Branko takes it a step further by stating that personal ethics are non-existent. Quote, "I actually find myself in sympathy with the operations of gecko, skilling, etc., not because I like them as individuals, but because I see an iron logic in their behavior. Let me explain that iron logic as composed of three elements. 1. Personal ethics do not exist. 2. Laws exist, and they are supposed to embody the general moral rules so that we know what we can do, ensuring that the pursuit of our private interests leads to some greater social good. 3. Then we just follow our private interests." Unquote. This is how many people think about economics today, and we find the same approach to economics. It has infiltrated religion and spirituality as deeply as any other sector of society, and it shows itself nowhere more powerfully than among evangelical Christians. Perhaps nothing illustrates this more perfectly than the 2016 presidential elections. Strangely, white evangelical America set their faith on a man who in no way represented their belief system. He was a womanizer and proud of it. He was a win-at-all-costs businessman that cared less about honesty and more about the bottom line. He was a crude communicator with a track record of abuse of obscenity. But he was our chosen leader. because he spoke to our basic concerns for safety and the loss of American industry. This commitment to the victorious post-war values became central to our political opinion. Donald Trump offered a voice declaring America's need to return to some elusive former greatness. It was the sound of the chosen nation status we believed we held, and it was as if God himself was trumpeting to us, or so American white evangelicals reasoned, because it appears that we voted for Trump in a 5-to-1 ratio, 81%. The cognitive dissonance required for evangelical Christians to vote for a man with the apparent morals of Larry Flint is stunning. But we were told that Paula White led him to Jesus and that he was just a baby Christian. So, of course, all his past and even his continued unconscionable behavior was acceptable because, hey, he was learning and growing. The biggest flip-flop of the 2016 election cycle was not Hillary's litany of differing opinions over the years that we were shown on TV. It was the evangelical mind, which only 4 years earlier thought that character was a crucial element in a national leader. Now we reasoned it was not such a big deal. In the shift of survey results from 2011 to 2016, white evangelical Protestants moved from being most concerned about a candidate's indiscretions to being the least concerned about the issue. The flip-flop in opinion was a 42 percentage point move, from only 30% saying they could trust an immoral person to run the nation to 72% saying they would trust an unethical individual to lead us. This flip-flop was the most dramatic change in the electorate in 2016, because Trump spoke a protectionary language about our mystical nostalgia for America. We were willing to trust him with our nation, whether we could actually trust him personally or not. Only some form of severe cognitive dissonance seems to make any sense out of this flip-flop. Evangelical Christians have now joined the ranks of economists who believed that things like ethics and morality had no business being in the same room with politics and economics. When the economy and politics were in action, God now had to bow his divine knee before them and then get out of the way. Our vote is a practical action. It represents things we struggle with every day. It speaks to our concerns over economics and safety. It shows what we think about morality in our nation and consequently in our neighborhood. This moment in our history may prove to be a critical transition in the story of evangelicalism in America, but it may not come out. But this didn't come out of nowhere. It was laying dormant in the background for years. Our favorite preachers spoke to us about finances and success. Many of them promised prosperity, told us that this was God's will for our lives, and they lived like it was true. Our offerings went to their lifestyles, their homes, and their cars and planes, and we in turn expected the same to come our way. As we gave, we anticipated receiving the reward for making our spiritual leaders rich. In the process, a number of evangelicals left the flock because they could not believe that this was the way God worked. They were right. But as is often the case, people tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now we find Jesus kicked to the curb in the minds of many post-evangelicals. This move toward a faith built on economic concern was a move toward house and home, and a move away from the nomadic nature of our faith. So now here's where, I'm going to say that again because here's the place where economics meets the gospel in a negative sense, and it informs our faith in such a way as to diminish the power of the gospel. So as I've been talking about, the gospel has an inherent nomadic nature to it. Let me say these words again. This move in politics, economics, and evangelicalism, this move toward a faith built on economic concern was a move toward house and home, and a move away from the nomadic nature of our faith. Trapped in the American dream, we found ourselves enslaved by its demands. The mortgage, the car payments, the debt on furnishings, and the Christmas rush to grant our children the same passion for capitalistic purchasing power that we have learned to call, quote, a living in this rat race. There is no time, no place for the gospel of going. Nothing was left for those outside our circles of family and close friends. There was nothing radical about the gospel of capitalism, except that it shouted extremely loud like the guard at the gates protecting the castle walls. Yes, our homes became our castles, and we fortified that home against the onslaught of everything that challenged it. Too often, it was the outsider, the immigrant, who was the challenge to our sense of home. Yet all this time, the gospel was an immigrant. It traveled to us across time and space. The gospel was born among first-century Jews who, being under Roman rule, were strangers in their own land. It has traveled across the countries and cities of our world to reach us 6,000 miles, dozens of cultures, and 2 millennia away. The question we have to ask ourselves is whether it will travel into our homes and be allowed to leave again, or if it will get stuck inside our homes as a promotion of our personal dreams. If it gets stuck, it will fade away into nothing. This is how crucial nomadism is to the character of the gospel. If the gospel is not moving, it is not the gospel at all. So as long as economics is about the numbers and is nothing much more than a subset of math, it remains primarily amoral. A few utilitarian thinkers have created groups that challenge people toward an ethical use of their money. Australian philosopher Toby Ord has a website called Giving What You Can. Here people are challenged to change the world through donating as much as they can to help alleviate the world's poverty, pain, and death. For most of us, economics is about what we can gain for ourselves and pass on to our children. Here, economics meets morality, and the concern for others eclipses concern for oneself. Although most of the utilitarians practicing this way of life are not evangelical Christians, they are modeling foundational gospel-like behaviors in their practice of giving. They're sending their money out for the benefit of others, and many of them are living sacrificially to do so. Strangely, few of these givers would consider their actions of denying many simple pleasures in life in order to benefit people to people in the greatest need. Few would consider that a sacrifice. This same behavior is built into the heart of the gospel, though. It goes, it benefits others, it does so without thinking of the cost to self. Could it be that the cost of our front door has been a hindrance to the release of the gospel that resides within our hearts? Larissa McFarquhar wrote a book called Strangers Drowning. She considers what she calls the do-gooder, the person who nearly torments us with their ethical thinking. They always see the world suffering and demand something to be done about it. They live on as little money as possible to give to as many as they can. She describes the do-gooder like this, quote, "I mean the kind of do-gooder who makes people uneasy. This person has a sense of duty that is very strong, so strong that he's able to repress most of his baser impulses in order to do what he believes to be right. This is a struggle, but one that he usually wins. He rarely permits himself time off from his work and spends little money on himself, so he has more to give away. He has his joys and pleasures, but they must fit, and they must gain admittance." Unquote. One of the strange factors to the do-gooders is that they see the problems of a stranger in equal balance to the problems of friends and family. Part of what makes this kind of person seem so alien to us is that they would sacrifice for a stranger as willingly as they would for their own family. Yet, isn't this what God in the person of Jesus did for you? Jesus counted his life worth the cost of your life, and was even in agreement with the Father, who somehow counted your life worth the cost of his Son. This fact should haunt us. God traveled outside his own home to chase after us. His concern extended beyond heaven and onto this messy earth. Does God's willingness to look outside his own front door change the way you think about the gospel? Does his willingness to chase after us at his own expense and even at his Son's personal expense challenge you? It challenges me, and it makes me see his love for the world in a whole new light. It even informs my politics. But that's nothing compared to the fact that it has caused me to see life in a whole new way. I am now haunted by the fact that God appears to be one of the rare individuals Larissa McFarquhar calls the do-gooder. His home was, in fact, not his home at all. It was a place built for others. Isaiah 66 put it this way: "The heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. But where is the house that you build to me, and where is the place of my rest, saith the Lord?" Now he answers this question of where is the place of my rest. "But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembles at my word." Isaiah 66, verses 1 and 2. The exciting thing about this is that it is a positive, life-changing truth for those who are nomadic and for those who are sedentary. The nomadic nature of the gospel guides our lives in a positive way, whether we stay or whether we go.
Thank you to my patrons who help make these missional travels and these podcasts possible. Without you, I couldn't do it. God bless you.
If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release, and at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think you're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.